Assalamu alaikum. I guess we'll get started inshallah. نحمده ونصلي على رسول النبي الكريم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. آمين. قال الله تعالى في شأن حبيبي إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد وعلى آل على سيدنا مولانا محمد وبارك وسلم عليه صلاة وسلام عليك يا سيدي يا رسول الله. So, continuing with the topic again of Ahlul Bayt, which, last week and last couple of weeks we've been talking about after the martyrdom of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and today inshallah we'll talk about events after Karbala. But at the beginning of last week we kind of went over the aspects of maintaining the honor and the respect of the Sahaba Ikram, and also at the same time maintaining the status and maqam of Ahlul Bayt. And these are things that are very important to keep in line. The one thing I forgot to mention last week is the hadith, which is famous hadith, which many of us know, but many of us don't know the background of the hadith. So the hadith is where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says that do not criticize my companions, because even if you spend the mountain of Uhud in gold, it won't equal even one mud, which is like maybe 6 pounds of wheat that they spend. So of course when we hear this, we relate this to ourselves, as we should. But if you understand the background to the hadith, then it also changes your perspective to some extent. So the background to this hadith is that there was an argument between Abdul Rahman bin Auf radiallahu anhu and Khalid bin Walid radiallahu anhu. So both of these are Sahaba. Khalid bin Walid radiallahu became Muslim after Hudaybiyah, before Fatih Makkah, so 7th year of Hijrah. Abdul Rahman bin Auf became Muslim during the secret days of propagation, so very early. He is one of the Sabiqun al-Awwalun, one of the initial Muslims. He is from Ashra Mubashara. So these two had an argument. And it's interesting, if you look at some of these arguments that are mentioned between the companions, they at times got very, very heated. And so, Khalid, he says some very derogatory words about Abdul Rahman. And this is when Rasulullah says to Khalid that do not criticize my companions. So he's saying this to Khalid, so who are we? So that's one thing we should understand. The other thing that's interesting here is Rasulullah didn't question who did what or what happened. He simply said, it wasn't who's right or wrong, it's what's right. He simply said to Khalid, look, don't do this, don't criticize him. We see the same thing when Rasulullah is returning from Banu Mustalaq. So, you had this dispute, almost a fist fight between the Muhajir and the Ansar, and each one is calling their own people. And Rasulullah comes and rebukes both of them. He didn't come and ask who pushed first or who did what. He rebukes both of them. That he says, you're going back to the days of ignorance. So, and we see this many, many places, even like with Abu Bakr. When Umar radiallahu anh comes and complains against Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam chastises Umar to such an extent that Abu Bakr radiallahu anh says, "Ya Rasulullah, I'm the one who was at fault," and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam isn't hearing any of that. No. So we have to keep these things in order and in line and in mind at all times. And also, when we're talking about this subject of Ahlul Bayt, and we talk about Imam Hassan al-Islam or Imam Hussein al-Salam, and as we've talked about so many times before and mentioned this so many times before, that the rule that both of them are following is the same rule. That to give up your own rights is a sign of decency, and to give up the rights of your beloved is a sign of hypocrisy. So, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says about Imam Hassan al-Islam that this son of mine is your master. That this son of mine is your master. And because of him there will be peace between two large groups. And so we've talked about this, but the thing is, what most of us don't understand or don't think about is everything that they did at a macro level, at a large level, like he's dealing with things at a governmental level. All of this is also applicable to us, even at the individual level, at the family level, at every other level. There are lessons. This is why it's so important to understand the lessons. The lessons aren't for somebody else. The lessons are for us, that we apply them to ourselves. So when we see in the situation of Imam Hassan al-Salam, any Muslim who has any iman knows who was right. Everybody knows Imam Hassan al-Islam was right. It was his right. And yet, for the greater good, for the good of the ummah, to create peace, he gives up all of those rights. Not just gives them up at the moment. We don't understand this either. He didn't just give them up at the moment. He gave them up knowing that even the conditions that he had laid were not going to be met. That's why he asked. He said, "Who will guarantee that these conditions will be fulfilled?" He knew. And for the next 10 years of his life, the difficulties that he faced. But all of it for the greater good. To maintain peace within the ummah. And so, we see the steps that Imam Hussein al-Islam takes. Again, in our minds, we think that they're different. They're not. Imam Hassan al-Islam's status amongst Ahlul Bayt is greater than that of Imam Hussein al-Islam, even though, from a practical standpoint, they are equal. But when Imam Hassan al-Islam was there, Imam Hussein al-Islam answered to him. And yet, from the time that Imam Hassan al-Islam is martyred, so 50-year Hijri, until the passing of Muawiyah, again, Imam Hussein al-Islam also, deals with all of the issues that were thrown his way, without creating more problems. And again, there's so many other things that can be said, but if we claim to love them, if we claim to be following them, then we need to follow them. We need to follow their example. And the examples, again, they're not just simply a governmental level examples. These are examples that are for us at every level, as an individual, as part of a family, part of a community, part of whatever else. and in reality as part of the Ummah. Otherwise, what face will we show, when we're asked, okay, they gave you this example, why didn't you follow it? Because again, they are the leaders of the youth of Jannah. And if we expect to follow them into Jannah, then we need to be following them in this life, so that it will be easy for us to follow them into Jannah in the hereafter. So again, just all of these, we're not talking about these stories just to be mentioning stories. And the problem, unfortunately, with most of us is, when we're listening to this, everybody's thinking about somebody else. Well, he does this, or she does this, or what about that, and we forget ourselves. I mean, again, we really don't understand the hardships that Imam Hassan al-Islam and Imam Hussein al-Islam went through, for those 19 years, and then the hardships that continue with Imam Hussein al-Islam, and the hardships, as you'll note from even last week, those hardships have not stopped. And they went through all of this knowing what is coming. Imam Hussein al-Islam knew what would happen to the household, to the daughters of the household of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam after him. Yet he still made that decision. He accepted that will. Like we were talking about in Jummah, the maqam of Ibrahim al-Islam is Radi bi Rada. It is to be pleased with the pleasure of Allah. And these are people who have attained that maqam. So, coming back to where we sort of left off last week. As I mentioned last week, Imam Hussein al-Islam is martyred, and after they martyr him, they light up the tents. They come and they raid the tents. They burn the tents. The army of Yazid. Everyone is drug out, and basically all that's left is Imam Zain al-Abidin and the women and children. That's it. And the women are treated like regular prisoners, and even him. Imam Zain al-Abidin looked very young, so they pulled his clothes off to see if he was of age, just to see, and they wanted to kill him. And of course, his aunt, the sister of Imam Hussein al-Islam, Bibi Zainab, protected him. And eventually, they decided, okay, yeah, we'll just leave him. And then, all of them are shackled. They're drugged to Kufa, presented in the court of Ibn Ziyad. And it's interesting, when Ibn Ziyad, he sees Imam Zain al-Abidin, he asks me, he says, what's your name? He says, Ali. He says, how can that be? Because Ali was killed in the field, in Karbala. Because Imam Ali Akbar is also Ali. So that's who he's referring to. And Imam Zain al-Abidin says, that's my older brother, Ali. And so, but eventually, as I mentioned last week, after a few days they are set out on the journey to Damascus. And of course, as I mentioned again last week and reiterating things, they go through a route where you don't have a lot of cities. You have some, of course, you're still going to come in contact with communities, people living in communities, and so, but they would, keep the prisoners away, and everybody was being told that these are enemies of the state, who were killed as traitors of the state, and these are their women, and they're all prisoners. And when they finally arrive in Damascus, they are initially paraded around the city. And when the people see this, they see, and the announcements made, oh, these traitors, they've been killed, and enemies of the state, and these are the prisoners of war, and they're being marched around throughout the city. And everybody is coming out on the rooftops to take a look. And then, when they finally come to the court, to the castle of Yazid, he's busy inside doing something else, and they're made to wait out in the heat. And this was a common thing even as they were coming from Kufa all the way to Damascus. Again, it is fall, but in the desert it doesn't matter, because the only thing is in the fall and winter in the desert, yes, cool at night, but it's still hot in the day. And so throughout this journey they've had to endure the heat without any shade. And then now they come here, they get to the court, and they're made to wait outside, because the king doesn't wait for anybody, he makes everybody else wait for him. This is the mindset of kings. They are too important to wait for anybody, and everybody else is too insignificant to be able to see them immediately. And so as they're waiting, one of these persons who's out on the rooftops is an old woman whose name is Fidda. She is originally from Abyssinia. So Abyssinia, if you know, at that time included what would today, modern day, be Ethiopia, Somalia, part of Kenya, and as well as at one time even parts of Yemen were considered part of the Abyssinian Empire. This is why those cultures overlap so much. And so this is where she was from. And when she sees these prisoners of war, she sees, they're being paraded through the city, they're not covered, and, so she sends somebody from her household to go and ask them if they need anything. And so then she sends water and some food and some sheets so that the women can cover themselves properly. And Bibi Zainab, she's watching all of this, seeing all of this, and she motions to Fidda to come, asking her to come to her. And so Fidda, who's an old woman at this point, back is bent, which was not uncommon back in the day. You had calcium deficiencies, various deficiencies, so her back is bent, and she comes, and and so Bibi Zainab, she asks her, she says, "Who are you? And why have you done, this favor to us when we have come all the way from Kufa to this place, and no one even asked about us?" And so she tells her, she says her name, and she says, "Actually, I'll tell nobody, but, when I was," she says that, when I was young, I stayed in Medina Munawwara, and I served in the household of Bibi Fatima Salamullahi alayha, the daughter of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And when she passed, I left there and came to Damascus. But before she passed, I asked her to give me some advice. And so if somebody can turn their thing to mute. So she says that when I asked her to give me some advice, and the advice that she gave me was that if you see a group of captives, then treat them well, be kind to them. I mean, you look at this advice, and then she says as well, she says, I was never able to, fulfill this advice of hers until today. I saw you coming, and I see that you're in need, so I started sending the stuff and doing all of this. And so then, if you think about this, Bibi Fatima Salamullah alayha also knew. The only advice she's giving her is treat the captives well. And these are the only captives she's ever been able to treat well. And so she says to Zainab, she says, and so this is why I've done what I've done, because of the advice that she had given me, this nasiyah that she had given me. And so Bibi Zainab, she still hasn't told her who she is. She says to her, she says, look, you've done us this favor in a condition where I have nothing to offer you. You've done this favor to us, I have nothing to give you back. But she says, but, is there some dua? Some request that you would like fulfilled? And so she says to her, she says, when I served in the house of Bibi Fatima, Salamullah alayhi, she had, some children, and, and I remember Hassan and Hussein and Zainab. And my only, of course, Imam Hassan al-Islam has already passed, and she knows that. And she says, my only desire now, I'm old and it's almost time for me to go, my only desire now is that I be able to see Zainab and Hussein. And so Bibi Zainab, she says to her, she says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has accepted your dua. He says, because I am Zainab, and the head that you see on this spear is Hussein. So she will also follow them into the court when they're finally brought in. Another thing that also happens is there's a companion of Rasulullah, Sa'd bin Sa'd, radiallahu anhu. And if you read in, say, Bukhari and, say, Muslim, there are various ahadith that are narrated through him, including those hadiths that deal with the virtues of Sayyidina Ali, karamallahu wajh. So Sa'd at that time happened to be in Damascus on a business trip. And he was also an older gentleman by this point. So he happened to be in Damascus, and he had also, when he arrived, or when he enters that city that day, they're all celebrating, the whole city is celebrating. So he asks, he says, what's going on? What is this, some type of festival that y'all have? And he's told that, no, this is, what happened is that there were some enemies of the state, and they have been killed, and their women have been captured, and they've been brought to the city. So he goes to take a look, and when he sees, the head of Imam Hussein al-Islam, he says to one person there, one of these people that had come with them, he says, this head resembles the grandson of Rasulullah, Hussein al-Islam. And he says, well, that's who it is. Which, of course, he was in shock. And this is one of the, as we've mentioned so many times, this was part of the mission of Imam Hussein al-Islam, was to shock the ummah back to life, to wake them up from the slumber that they had fallen into. And so he also will follow them into the court. And so when they enter the court, and all of these heads are initially, the way the procession went was Imam Hussein al-Islam's blessed head was first, everybody else followed, and then the women and Imam Zain al-Abidin followed them. And as they're being brought in, it's being mentioned who is who. Because he asked, he says, who is who? But also when he sees the head of Imam Hussein al-Islam, and this is something that Tabari mentions, one of the first statements from Yazid is that I have taken revenge for Badr. Because in the Battle of Badr, Yazid's mother or Yazid's paternal grandmother. So his grandmother on his father's side is Hind bin Utbah, the wife of Abu Sufyan. So if you look at the Battle of Badr, the first 3 people that were killed in the Battle of Badr was her Hind father, Utbah, who was killed by Hamza radiallahu anhu, her uncle Shayba, who was killed by Ubaydullah ibn Harith and then actually finished off by Ali radiallahu anhu, and her brother Walid, who was killed by Ali radiallahu anhu. So these are the first 3 who were killed in the Battle of Badr, and this is why Yazid is making this statement that I have taken revenge for the Battle of Badr. And then he's, addressing them arrogantly. And it's interesting, when he does all this addressing arrogantly, Bibi Zainab is the one who responds to him. Imam Zain al-Abidin is still sick and weak, or rather weak. And of course, he was sick when they left. They made this long journey. They weren't fed well. They weren't given very much water in the heat of the desert, all the way from, this long journey. And so she responds to Yazid, and she gives this khutbah, or rather, in responding to Yazid, she recites various verses from Surah Al-Imran. So Al-Imran, first she talks about verse number. Yazid is boasting at, he's killed Hussein. He's killed all these people. He's taken revenge for Badr. And he's boasting about his power and his authority. So one of the first verses that she recites is verse number 169 of Surah Al-Imran, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَحْسَبَنَ الَّذِينَ قُتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَمْوَاتًا بَلْ أَحْيَاءٌ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ يُرْزَقُونَ. That do not even think that those who are slain in the way of Allah, that they are dead. But nay, indeed they are alive, and they receive their sustenance from their Lord. But she also, Rasulullah is Bashir as well as Nadir. He is the one who gives glad tidings as well as the warner. So glad tidings to those of paradise, and a warner to those who are walking towards the fire. And so, of course, she is representing that household. And so she now also warns him. And it says, وَلَا يَحْسَبَنَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. Verse 178 of Surah Al-Imran. Let not the unbelievers think that our respite to them is good for themselves. We grant them respite that they may grow in inequity, but they will have a shameful punishment. It's like with Fir'aun and the many Fir'auns that we see today, and the many Fir'auns that have passed throughout the generations, throughout history. But when we think about the Fir'aun of Musa alayhi salam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not even give him a headache. Gave him a long life. Gave him wealth and power and control over a whole empire that was the dominant empire of its time. And of course he grows in arrogance. And then when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala snatches the leash, then it's too late. Same warning that she's giving Yazid. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, he gives respite to those who disbelieve. Yeah, your time is only in this world. Just wait. And this is, of course, Yazid, even as she's warning him, grows more and more arrogant. And then, he starts abusing them verbally and threatening them. And this is, at this point, Fidda, the old woman, the Abyssinian woman, she stands up. And she says to Yazid, very harshly and rudely. And of course, rude here is a term of perspective. From Yazid's standpoint, this is very rude of her. From any decency standpoint, this is, she's defending the honor of the Ahlul Bayt. And so she says this, and she says that these are the queen, you think you're a king, these are the queens of this world and the next. So when she says this, and she says this very, in a very harsh tone, Yazid says to his, soldiers in his court, says, who is this woman who doesn't know the etiquettes of talking to the king? Which is, kill her, behead her. That's the punishment for talking to the king like this. You behead her. And when a couple of them moved towards her, there were other men in his army that were from Abyssinia, from the same place that she is. So these men step forward and say that she is the mother of our nation. If anyone touches her, there will be consequences. And so they back off. But this is when Zainab, she says, addressing Rasulullah, Ya Muhammad, that, even today there are people who protect this woman, simply because of where she is from or who she is. Is there no one who will protect the household of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? And there were some other companions like Sa'd bin Sa'd who made some statements in the defense of Ahlul Bayt, but of course they're dismissed and also threatened. But when Yazid, when he sees this, when he sees that he's starting to lose some control, because you have people now realizing who they are, standing up for who they are, now he changes his tone. And this is what people do when they feel like, or rather what leaders do when they feel like they're in trouble. They're still going to have, they still have the same end agenda, but they simply change the wording, make it seem more nice. And this is what they do. And so this is what Yazid does, and this is what a lot of people will quote about him and say, he was decency, he was so sad when they had killed Imam Hussein, he said, I would have settled for less. Well, if you would have settled for less, then why did you give the command? And then there are people who say, oh no, there's no proof that he gave the direct command, and yet there's various places, various statements of various people at that time, including men of his own army, men that he had do this, their statements that clearly show that it was his command and this was his will. And even if you don't accept any of that, then how come he did not demote or punish anyone who was involved in the killing of Imam Hussein al-Islam? In fact, he did the exact opposite. Everyone who was involved, who had been promised a position, was given that position, if not even more. And so we see this, of course, there will always be those who defend shaitan, because they themselves, are part of that system. So Yazid, of course, when he changes his tune now, he says, okay, let's take the prisoners away, because he's realizing, he's losing control. The prisoners are eventually locked up in the dungeon. It is one of the wives of Yazid who convinces him that, look, these are, not just anybody, these are special people, they need to be treated specially, so eventually they're brought back into the castle and given rooms in the castle to stay. Or in his, I guess the best word is castle anyway, so I just use that. And so this is, again, a shift in the attitude, or rather a shift in the superficial attitude. As we will see soon, the real attitude never changes in his situation. Islam and Iman is to change your way. And of course we know, Islam is the love of Allah and His Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so in loving Allah and His Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then we love the ones that they love, the ones that are close to them, such as Ahlul Bayt. So, and that love should transform us. Sometimes the nature doesn't change, but the nature should be redirected in a different point. And simple example of this is Umar radiallahu anhu. When we look at Umar radiallahu anhu, he was a man, of extreme before Islam. He remained a man of extreme even after Islam, but he redirected it. Even though that extreme was also cooled by the Jamal of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, by the beauty of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we see, Umar, who's supposed to be, so hard and harsh, who, when he becomes a Khalifa, himself is carrying the food for this old woman on the outskirts of Medina Munawwara, who has no one to take care of her. Someone who, you see, again, this change. Why? Because of the Jamal of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam balancing him out. It is his connection to that Jamal, his connection to Ahlul Bayt. We see the same thing with Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr is a man of extreme softness. And yet when he becomes a Khalifa, now he needed to be firm. And we see how the Jalal of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam balances him out, so that he's able to send the armies against those who have apostated. So if Yazid had given into the love, meaning if he had actual Iman, if he had the love of Allah and His Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the love of that love would then cause him to love all those whom they love, then we would see something different. But because he doesn't have any love, which means he has no Iman, then we see what we see, and we will continue to see. So as I mentioned last week, the news of the martyrdom of Imam Hussein alayhi salam and those with him reached Medina Munawwara immediately, as well as Makkah Mukarram. And then you have people from here setting out to go and see what actually happened. So you have people that went to Karbala, people that went to Sham, people that went to Kufa from here to investigate the reality of what happened. And so, the household is kept in Damascus, and then sometime toward the end of Safar. So Karbala happens the 10th of Muharram. Sometime at the beginning of Safar is when the prisoners and the head of Imam Hussein alayhi salam arrives in Damascus. At one point I forgot to mention Fidda, because of her love of Ahlul Bayt, she is buried in a cemetery in Damascus amongst the quarter of Ahlul Bayt. So that quarter of the cemetery is where Ahlul Bayt, people from Ahlul Bayt who passed there, were buried, and she is also buried amongst them because of her loyalty to them. So now, when you have everyone looking, eventually, as I said, toward the end of Safar, beginning of Rabiul Awwal, somewhere in that time frame, is when Imam Zain al-Abidin, along with Bibi Zainab and the women of the household of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, arrive back in Medina Munawwara. And when they arrive, before they enter the city, they send a person into the city to let the people know that they are coming. And when they arrive and enter the city, the mourning, the sorrow, the grief that the people there have, at what happened to Ahlul Bayt, what happened to Imam Hussein al-Islam, and the conditions that they were forced to bear. And again, they're not doing any of this for their own good. All of this is for the greater good of the Ummah. And so when so when they come back and people are asking them, what happened? So this is where we get a lot of the information that we know about Karbala, from Imam Zain al-Abidin, from Bibi Zainab, and those women amongst the household. And also some of it is from the soldiers that were on the other side as well. The things that they bragged about or spoke about. And so at this point, everybody is in this state that how could this have happened? But the reality of things are now dawning upon them as well. Because again, as I keep saying, Imam Hussein al-Islam did this to shock the Ummah back to life. So now they're realizing how the Ummah had been in this slumber, or in this state of coma. That, we're doing the ritualistic practices without the true connection. Sometimes, and this is common, when you do something over and over and over again, it just becomes habit. Islam is not about habits. And we talk about, you should have good habits, but the habit should be in the habit that, I'm doing something without even thinking, without any connection to why I'm doing it. And this is why, like the last few weeks or a few weeks ago in Jummah, we spoke about the Salat of Sayyidina Ali, Karamallahu wajh. This was not just habit, it was not just going through motions. So, all of these rituals are to strengthen our connection to Allah and His Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And if the rituals aren't helping us in doing that, then we're not doing the rituals properly. We're just going through the motions. So of course, Yazid on the other end is also kind of trying to play his hand, because he realizes that as people find out more and more what happened, you're going to have people that are going to, start questioning his authority and coming against his authority, which of course the reality is he has no authority, no legitimate authority. And so he also starts sending people out, sending his, with propaganda, and also inviting people that are influential in their areas to come and meet him, so that literally he can bribe them into saying that, oh no, he's a great guy, And so in Medina Munawwara you have a family, the family of Abdullah ibn Hanzala, radiallahu anhu. who was a very influential family in Medina Munawwara. So several things are going on at once, and I'm jumping around here. One is, Yazid could have executed the prisoners. The problem was that people realized who they were, and if he executed them, again, that would cause more problems for him. So he sends them back to Medina. But what he does is, again, he sends out the propaganda, but he also makes it very difficult for people to associate with them, because he has his spies everywhere. And people that associate with them, okay, we can't do anything to them directly, but we can do things to people that associate with them. And that doesn't look as bad as doing something to them directly. And so this is what he starts doing. And this is why people then kind of back off. But as I said, you had Abdullah ibn Hanzala, and I was listening to one idiot talking about the revolt that came out of Medina Munawwara. And he says, the people of Medina Munawwara, they broke their allegiance with Yazid, but none of the companions did. It was just the people of Medina, but none of the companions did. This is what he's saying. And he gives one example of Abdullah ibn Umar, when this is going on, trying to convince the people not to rise up against Yazid. Of course, he doesn't explain why Abdullah ibn Umar is telling the people not to do this. And we'll come to that point later on. So Abdullah ibn Hanzala, we have to know who he is to understand his significance. And that, yes, he is a companion of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we have to know how is he a companion of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as well. So Abdullah ibn Hanzala is the son of Hanzala. Hanzala is that companion of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam who is known as the one who was bathed by the angels. Why was he bathed by the angels? Why was his ghusl at the time of death given by the angels? And so his background is that he is from the Ansar. He became Muslim when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam arrived in Medina Munawwara. Hanzala is. So this is the father of Abdullah ibn Hanzala. He got married the night before the Battle of Uhud. So when he got married, he figured, well, I'll spend some time with my wife, and then I'll go and catch up with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Uhud. So he gets married that night, and then, of course, the next day, the battle begins. He still hasn't made it to the battlefield. He, after Fajr, he spent some time with his wife, and then the news arrives that the Muslims are in difficulty in Uhud. And he has no time to take ghusl. He immediately runs out of the house, straight toward Uhud. And he is amongst the martyrs of Uhud. And when they were burying him, the companions even said that they saw water dripping from him. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told him that the angels and the women of Jannah have come to bathe him. So that is the father of Abdullah ibn Hanzala. So Hanzala is conceived on the night of Uhud. Uhud took place 3rd year of Hijri. Shawwal, 3rd year of Hijri. And so he's born, 9 months after that. So he's born 4th year of Hijri. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed Rabiul Awwal, 11th year of Hijri. Because he spent 10 years in Medina, and then you have those 3 months. So So basically, he is 6 years old when Rasulullah ﷺ passes. He is a companion of Rasulullah ﷺ. After he is born, his mother marries Talha bin Ubaidullah radiallahu anhu. He grows up in the house of Talha, who is from the Ashra Mubashara. You know, he is coming and seeing Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He is a companion of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Even though, yes, he was a young boy, but he is still a companion of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Muhammad bin Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. If you look at the books of Rijal, he is accepted as a companion of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, even though he was only, what, 4 months old, 3 months old when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed. Because he was born on the way, when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was on the way to the Hajj. So Zil Hajj, and then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam made the Hajj. He comes back and he passes in Rabiul Awwal. So he's born on, you know, on the way to Hajj. So Zil Hajj, Muharram, Safar. So 3¼ months old. Yet he's accepted because what? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he saw Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam with Iman. He's a child, he has Iman. Abdullah ibn Hanzala is 6 years old. He saw Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam with Iman. So Abdullah ibn Hanzala is someone who has a lot of influence in Medina Munawwara. He's well respected, large family, many sons, companion of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so when Yazid sends for these delegations to come and meet him, he also requests Abdullah ibn Hanzala and his sons. And Abdullah ibn Hanzala accepts the invitation. And he accepts the invitation because he wants to go and see who this man is. Who can stoop so low as to do what he has done? And so when he arrives in Damascus, you know, Yazid, you know, like he does with everybody else, he gives him a gift of 100,000 dirham, silver coins. Again, that time you could buy a cow with 3 dirham. So, so you could buy what, 100,000 dirham, so 33,000 cows you could buy. Which, you know, $1,000 a cow, so that makes what, like, you know, $3 million or 30, what, 3 million? 30, yeah, or $30 million, whichever one. I'm not thinking right now. So whichever one it is, okay, that's a lot, either way. He gives each one of his sons 10,000 dirham. And then other parts of the delegation, he gives 10,000 dirham to so-and-so and this and that. And of course, it doesn't matter because none of it's his wealth. It's all from Baitul Mal. It's the wealth of the people that he's giving out. Just like people, you know, like lawmakers or politicians here, they have no problem spending money because it's not their money. It's easy to spend somebody else's money. And especially when you got it illegitimately. And so when Abdullah ibn Hanzala radiallahu returns to Medina Munawwara, the people come to meet him and say, well, what did you see? And this is mentioned in Ibn Kathir's Sirah, you know, the Sirah book that he wrote, Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya. He mentions this, where when Abdullah ibn Hanzala radiallahu, again, who is a companion of Rasulullah is asked about Yazid, his response to them, he says that I have seen a man who has no religion. Not a morning goes by that he is not hungover. He spends time with young boys, and he mentions various other things that he does. And so the people now ask him, they say, well, I mean, you've accepted this money, what are you going to do? You know, because I mean, the king gave you this gift, you accepted it. You accepted it, meaning you know, in the king's mind, you accepted his gift. You accepted him. They say, well, you know, you've accepted this gift. What are you going to do? He says, I'm going to use this money to raise an army to go and fight him. Which is what he starts. He starts this, and of course Yazid has his spies in Medina Munawwara. And word doesn't take long for word to reach Yazid as to what's going on. And he goes, and now first thing Yazid does, he sends a letter to Ibn Ziyad. And he says, I want you to lead this army to go and attack Medina Munawwara. And Ibn Ziyad's response, which in itself tells us who gave the order to kill Imam Hussein al-Islam, his response is that I killed Hussein at your order, alayhi. I'm not going to do this. So in reality, he did the bigger sin, but he's not going to do the smaller sin. I mean, that's what it equals. I mean, they're both major sins, but he did the greater, the worst of the two, but he's not going to do the less of the two. I killed him, but I'm not going to do this. Because with killing of Imam Hussein al-Islam, it wasn't that obvious. You attack a whole city, it becomes very obvious who you are. And so he refuses, and eventually, after going, offering the leadership or the generalship of this army to a few other folks, he finally finds a person, Muslim bin Uqba, who says, oh, I will do this. And you look at the names of these guys. Muslim bin Uqba, Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, Ubaydullah, and the slave of Allah, and the slave of Shaitan. Muslim has nothing to do with, this Muslim has nothing to do with Islam. He's, his name should be Kafir. But he accepts this. And the orders to the army are that, the Haram of Medina. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the sanctuary of the Kaaba Haram. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam made the sanctuary of Medina Munawwara Haram. Protected sanctity where you cannot do things, you cannot kill, you cannot, do all of these things. Yazid says to them that I make the Haram of Medina halal for you for 3 days. Do whatever you want. And so this also explains to us why Imam Hussein al-Islam left Medina Munawwara. Because he understands that, again, when guidance is taken from the heart, there are no limits. There are no limits. And so he knew that if he stayed in Medina Munawwara, this army that's now coming would have been sent a long time ago against him. So the army comes, and the army is like 100,000 men. Massive army. And of course, Medina Munawwara is surrounded. And when the army arrives, the people come running to Bibi Salma, radiallahu anha, the wife of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the only wife of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam who's still living. Again, she is the one who was given the sand from Karbala. She is that wife. So they come to her and they ask her, is this that army that will be sent against Imam Mahdi? If you remember, when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam talks about the end times, he talks about Imam Mahdi, and Imam Mahdi will initially come to Medina, and then the army that will be under 80 flags, and each flag will have 12,000 men underneath it, will be sent from Sham against Imam Mahdi. So a 1,000,000-man army, literally. And of course, when you're out in the desert and you see 100,000 people, it's hard to say, well, is that 100,000 or 1,000,000? Or it could be 50,000. So, but you just see the sea of people. It's a lot. So they come to her and ask her, is this that army? And she says, no, this is not that army. This is a different army. So they attack the city. You have different estimates as to how many people were killed. Most scholars will tell you, and most historians will tell you, roughly about 10,000 people were killed in these 3 days. Even Ibn Kathir, who is actually from Banu Umayyah, even he acknowledges that at least 2,000 people were killed. These are the people of Medina Munawwara for whom Rasulullah said that if anybody even scares them, Allah will place him in hell, much less kill them. So for these 3 days, they're killing whoever they can. Everybody is hiding in their houses or wherever they can hide. For these 3 days, there is no adhan called from the masjid of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There is no salat in that sense in the masjid of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They use the masjid of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to tie their horses in as a stable for their horses. Sayyid bin Musayyab, who is the son-in-law of Abu Hurairah, he was in the masjid when the army came in. And when they came in, he hid under the mimbar of Rasulullah. He went into this enclosure under the mimbar and hid in there. So he stays in there for 3 days, and he says that the only way he knew what time it was is that he could hear the adhan from the Rawda of Rasulullah. So that Rasulullah is making jama'ah with Abu Bakr and Umar in the Rawda. He says, I hear that adhan. And this is how he knew. Then, they all, 10,000 people killed. At the end of these 3 days, there are no more companions of Badr left. All of the companions of Badr who were still alive until that point have been martyred in these 3 days. So many companions of Rasulullah martyred. This is why Abdullah ibn Umar was saying to the people, look, don't do this. Because he knew how Yazid was going to respond. Not because Yazid was right. Not because, that Yazid deserves our allegiance. But because he's saying this is what he's going to do. So these other guys, they try to make it sound like, he was telling people not to break this allegiance because, this is the right thing to do. No. He's saying don't break the allegiance this way because this is what he's going to do. So this was the first revolt that came out from the martyrdom of Imam Hussein Islam against Yazid. The commander of this army dies at the end of those 3 days. He gets sick and dies suddenly. Which is a sign to us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not even allow him to make tawbah. He can't make tawbah. He dies while in the middle of, this slaughter and massacre in Medina, and of all places, Medina Munawwara.
You're talking about Muslim.
Yeah, Muslim bin Uqba, the commander of the army. So now there is, they make this guy named Hussein bin Numair their commander. While this is going on in Medina Munawwara and the news reaches Makkah Mukarramah, Abdullah ibn Zubair in Makkah declares himself as Khalifa. And when he does this, after all of this has happened, and now the people are waking up to what's going on, You know, the coma has subsided, and they're all waking up as to what's going on. And Abdullah ibn Zubair makes this announcement. All of the people of Hijaz acknowledge him. So Yazid sends word to this army, and we have to understand one thing here. You know, I'm talking about, okay, he was 3 days here, yeah, but 3 days, and then by the time the army moves, it's several days and even months. Because you're talking about a time when word coming back and forth, letters and messages coming back and forth took weeks. So you got to remember that when we're talking about this. It's not like, okay, this happened one day, and then, you know, this happened on the 25th, and by the 26th something else is. No, this is kind of going on. This is a whole process. So eventually this army is sent message to go and attack Mecca and to subdue Abdullah ibn Zubair and bring everybody back in line, according to them. Put them back in line. Put them, you know. So this is when this army arrives and now surrounds Mecca and lay siege to Mecca Mukarramah. And while they're laying siege to Mecca Mukarramah, they're also catapulting fire into Mecca. You know, because they can't, you know, Mecca, if you know the area, well, you can't tell the area now because of all the buildings that they put up, all this un-Islamic architecture and all this stuff that they put up, you know, basically to distract people from the purpose of going there and to commercialize the Hajj and the Umrah. So, but, you know, if you knew the area before, you know, Mecca is surrounded, especially the Kaaba, surrounded by mountains. Not an easy place to get in for an army all at once. So what they do is they kind of surround the access points into and out of Mecca, and then they eventually start catapulting fire in. And this is when the Kaaba was burnt, and 3 of the walls fell down. The roof of the Kaaba at this time was wood. The roof burnt. The horns of the ram that Ibrahim al-Islam had sacrificed in place of Ismail al-Islam, they were still kept in the Kaaba at that time. They were burnt and destroyed. And so, you know, this siege continues on for a few months, and eventually during the siege itself, Yazid dies. So again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not even give him the opportunity to make tawbah for what he's been doing. So Yazid dies in the middle of all of this. And when Yazid dies, you know, because you have issues going on, so when Yazid dies in Damascus, what happens is that his son is made king. His son's name is Muawiyah. So Yazid's father was Muawiyah, radiallahu anhu. Yazid's son's name is also Muawiyah. Muawiyah the second, yes. And so he is given the, I guess, the keys to the throne, or given the throne. But this is, you know, this is proof that even in the house of the devil, you can get someone who is decent. And this is that decency in him, because when he's given this throne, he stands up on the pulpit and he says that, how can I accept this? How can I accept this position when I have seen what my father did to the household of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in order to attain this? He walks away. About, you know, 40 days later or so, he is found in his room dead, conveniently, which then triggers a civil war within Banu Umayyah. And eventually what will happen is, you know, because you have what was known as the Marwani Umayyads and the Safwani Umayyads. So Abu Sufyan, Muawiyah, Yazid. So for anyone from Abu Sufyan radiallahu anhu's lineage is considered Safwani Umayyads, and then anyone from Marwan bin Hakam's lineage is considered Marwani Umayyad. So you have a civil war with these two groups, and when this starts, Hussein bin Numair is called back to Damascus. But before he goes, he comes and he meets with Abdullah ibn Zubair radiallahu anhu. And he says to him, he says, I will acknowledge you as the leader, as the Khalifa, and I will give you allegiance as the Khalifa if you come back with me to Damascus and you rule from there. And Abdullah ibn Zubair radiallahu anhu says that you were part of that army that desecrated Medina Munawwara, and part of the army that did what they did to Imam Hussein al-Islam, so I will not, I do not want your allegiance. And so he goes back to Damascus. There are many groups that will come and join Abdullah ibn Zubair because they all have a common enemy. And we'll go into this later. So there'll be a coalition that forms. And for 9 years, Abdullah ibn Zubair then will be the leader of the Muslims. Banu Umayyah, at the pinnacle of Abdullah ibn Zubair's rule, Banu Umayyah will be left to a very small portion of Sham before they make a comeback. When they discover Hajjaj bin Yusuf. And we'll go into that later, because these revolutions that come from the actions of Imam Hussein al-Islam are important to understand as well, even though we're not talking directly about Ahlul Bayt, but they are the consequences of the actions of Ahlul Bayt. So I will end here officially, or sort of, inshallah, today. Any questions? He was not 11. The question was Imam Zain al-Abidin 11 or 16? He was not 11. You'll see that in some of the books that he was like 9 or 11. He was closer to 20. So he was probably like 18 or 19 at that time. And because there are various reasons, but sometimes to give some people to give something more dramatic effect will kind of make everybody younger. But when you really start looking at things going on and stuff, you realize that they were older. And you don't need the dramatic effect. I mean, what happened is bad enough. But yeah, because, if you look at like the birth of Imam Muhammad Baqir and other things, you realize that, he was closer to 20.
When they come out to the Medina, what happened to them? They're still alive, right? Bibi Zainab and Zayn bin Laden.
Yeah, so the question is, what happened to Ahlul Bayt when this army of Yazid attacked? Yeah, so basically, the people that were killed was anybody who was out in the streets, anyone who came against the army. So, of course, you have Imam Zain al-Abidin, who's already been marginalized, so he's pushed to the outskirts, along with the daughters, his aunt and stuff. So they were not attacked in this attack in that way. But all of the people of Medina suffered. And these are things, when you look at like Ayyam, these 3 days in which this happened are known as Ayyam al-Hurra. And these are things that are mentioned in the books of Hadith. So it's not like, okay, yeah, this is from the history books. No, these are things that are mentioned directly from the books of Hadith. But people still try to downplay them because they want to defend Yazid. Because like people, when you talk about the killing of Imam Hussein al-Islam, that is in reality a greater sin than this attack. But when you talk to most people who don't know much about anything, it's easier to convince them, oh, look at what Yazid did to Medina. So then, oh wow, then it's like, oh, you know. But when you talk about Imam Hussein alayhi salam, it's like, you know.
So that time, Imam Hussein, how old he was when he got martyred?
So Imam Hussein alayhi salam was born 4th year of Hijrah. So he, and this is 61. So he's like 57, 58 at the time of Karbala. Any other questions?
Then Imam Mahdi come from Hussein bin Laden?
Imam Mahdi alayhi salam.
I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah, Imam Mahdi alayhi salam, his father will be from the lineage of Imam Hassan alayhi salam. His mother will be from the lineage of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. His father's name will be Abdullah. His own name, Imam Mahdi, Mahdi is his title. So his own name will be Muhammad. So Muhammad ibn Abdullah. The same as the name of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
I don't know that one.
Yeah.
Mother's name will be Amina.
Yeah, and his mother's name will also be Amina. So
So he coming as the form of Rasulullah?
no, he will come with the character of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but his appearance will be different. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam described his appearance: prominent nose, broad forehead.
So he would be born in Arabia or elsewhere?
I don't know. I don't know where he will be born. I know that he will be from this lineage, though. Yeah.
One time, I don't know what's a joke or not, but this he might be a Kurdish. I don't know.
I don't know. Everybody wants to claim him.
Because at one point in time, they say one of his wife, Imam Ali's wife, is from Kurdish. I'm not sure. I heard about it.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't know.
I don't know if they said it as a joke or say they mean it. I don't know.
I can find that out.
Because one of Imam Ali's wife, I think it was a Kurdish from where I come from.
Yeah. See, like the mother of Imam Zain al-Abidin, she was the daughter of, his mother is the daughter of Imam Hassan. Okay. But Imam Zain al-Abidin, one of his wives is from Sindh, who is the mother of Imam Zaid. So, but that gets into a different, branching there. But yeah, because of Islam expanding, they did take on wives from various places. So it's possible. We can see.
I'm not sure. I'm just saying.
Yeah, like I said, it's possible. But we can. I'll look that up.
I don't have no knowledge, no nothing, but this is what I heard.
What you heard, yeah. So, anything else?
Salman was also with Imam Zainul Abidin and Bibi Zainab.
She what now? Who missed that?
When they came to attack, 100,000 of armies
Yes.
came to attack. She was also with
I don't know where she was. I don't know if Bibi Salma. The question is, was Bibi Salma, was she with Imam Zain al-Abidin and Bibi Zainab? And I don't know. Because of course the houses of Rasulullah, meaning the houses of the wives of Rasulullah, were attached to the masjid. And so I don't know where they were. So inshallah, I'll end here. We'll pick up from here next week, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to understand and to practice the lessons that we get from the lives of Ahlul Bayt, and to be able to implement them into our lives and to move forward. And may He give us that love, which in itself should be our teacher for understanding them and connecting us to them. And may He give us the love of Himself. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give the love of Himself and the love of His Habib sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Ahlul Bayt and the companions and all of those whom they love. And may He give protection and strength and victory to our brothers and sisters in in Palestine and wherever the Muslims are being oppressed, including Sudan and Kashmir and Congo and literally throughout the Muslim world. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.